Okay. So at the outset, let me thank Dr. Pachure for inviting me to have this lecture with the residents. And what I've tried to do is CTV is one of the commonest exam cases in MS Ortho exam or D Ortho or DNB. And even generally, you need to know a few concepts which will help you, one, treat the patient better, and two, pass your exam efficiently. Right? So let us talk about concepts in CTV. If you look at the pathoanatomy, the first thing that you should know is that CTV is a complex three-dimensional deformity. And even though it is complex, there are four components to it. First is equinus, second it is varus in the heel and forefoot, third adduct, and then a high arch, that is supination, which makes it cavus. So the mnemonic which people usually use is cave, C-A-V-E, in the reverse order. So if somebody asks you what are the deformity in CTV, it is cavus, adductus, varus, and equinus from front to back. The etiology of CTV in India is about 1 to 2 per 1,000 live births. It is the most commonest diagnosed and treated congenital anomaly in the country. In blacks, the incidence has been reported to be as high as 3 to 4, and Polynesian Indians, it's as high as 6 to 7 per 1,000. Males usually are more common than females in the ratio of 3 to 1, and 40% of patients will have bilateral clubfoot. The inheritance pattern is usually a polygenic multifactorial, and you may have a 22 times higher chance if one of the sibling has got a clubfoot. If you look at the theories of, if somebody asks you, or if you look at theories, how clubfoot happens, it's still not exactly proven what happens. But there are 6 established theories as published in 86 by Peretti, who said that it could be chromosomal abnormalities, or it could be embryonic in origin, or it is otogenic, or a fetal malpositioning, or there is a neurological problem in utero peroneal palsy, or it's a primary muscle problem, that is myogenic. Okay, but nothing has been conclusively proven till yet. Till we came to what is accepted now today by Professor Ponseti. And let me just highlight, today is actually Ponseti's birthday. So today is World Clubfoot Day. So we must thank this man, Dr. Ignacio Ponseti, for writing this book and beautifully illustrating to us how clubfoot behaves and what is his thought process about clubfoot. So what did Ponseti say? Studied the pathology of the clubfoot. He dissected several normal feet, and he also had a chance to dissect stillborn babies who had club feet, and 2 club feet in even a 17-week aborted fetus. And he came to some conclusions, which I will tell you. What Ponseti said was that it is a genetic disease, yes, but the genes responsible for creating the clubfoot deformity usually are active start from the 12th intrauterine week of life to the 20th week of life, and the effect may last up to 5 years. Okay, please try to understand what he means. He says that every gene has a trigger. Under environmental conditions or because of positioning, if you have the abnormal gene and it gets activated or expresses itself, what happens is there is excessive synthesis of collagen tissue in the ligaments, tendons, and the sheaths on the posteromedial aspect of the foot. And the activity of this excess collagen formation can continue till about 4 to 5 years of age. Okay, so what he just says is that 12 weeks of intrauterine life to 5 to 6 years of age, somehow the gene activates too much of collagen synthesis in the posteromedial aspect of the foot, which includes ligaments, the tendon sheath of tibialis posterior, or the collagenous tissue. And that causes an inversion and plantar flexion and cavus contracture. Now, because this is such an overactive collagen synthesis process, if you put knife to it, surgery done in very young kids leads to increase in the collagen synthesis and makes it even more stiffer. which is why then it could explain that there are so many relapses and stiff feet because of early done surgery. And also it may explain relapses if you don't stretch out the collagen and continue bracing till long period of time. And this theory can also explain that sometimes you get a baby clubfoot when he has undergone, the mother has undergone 2 or 3 ultrasounds and that nothing was reported. So that is the commonest clinical problem we face. A mother and says that I have got ultrasound done and it do anything, and now he has said it could become active till 20th week of fetal life. Okay, so our ultrasounds are done at conception to confirm pregnancy, and do it once again at about 12 weeks, which they call an anomaly scan, and about 16 weeks. 20-week scans normally nobody does because abortions are illegal at that age. So you're not supposed to do them. And then you do towards maturity in the last trimester for delivery. So you might have a clubfoot which might be missed. A little explanation there. And the eyes never see what the mind does not know. So it is very important that you know this concept. What is the actual pathology there? There are two components, interosseous and intraosseous. The pathology is the foot is plantar flexed at the ankle and subtalar joint. The hind foot is in varus and inversion. The midfoot and the forefoot are adducted, inverted, and in slight equinus, creating a cavus. Calcaneus, navicular are medially displaced and words over the talus, and the cuboid actually shifts medially. And the soft tissue contractures are maintaining these deformities. After dissecting the intraosseous pathology, what was discussed that the actually head and neck of the talus is actually narrow and it has a reduced angle of declination with an increased obliquity, which encourages the navicular to slip off. So a short neck, a misshapen anterior talar facet causes the subluxation, and the anterior part is quite wide. Now that is important because when you release, you allow the syndesmosis to open up, you cannot achieve good dorsiflexion, which is why part of the release is dissecting and releasing the anterior inferior tibiofibular ligaments or the syndesmotic ligaments. So these are the pathologies that you see. Normally the cuboid is inclined at about 160 degrees and is having a normal neck. In clubfoot, it is found that there is a shortened neck and the declination is about 115 degrees. So it's in varus. So these are maintained by contractures. The second thing you need to understand is that the subtalar joint is actually in a spin. There is a subluxation and there is a three-dimensional deformity. This is very important because sometimes you don't get the concept that posterolateral structures also need to be released if you want to derotate the calcaneus. And this is also important to understand Ponseti, because if you put your thumb on the calcaneus and prevent the calcaneus from rotating, it's not a two-dimensional deformity, it's a three-dimensional deformity. So these are the ligaments, we'll talk about them later, and I won't talk much here. So when you take the history of the child in exam, always inquire about congenital defects of the locomotor system. Family history, as I said, is important for prognostication in the second offspring. It's 1 in 35 second child can get clubfoot. When you examine the child, the baby should be fully undressed. Examine the child supine. Then in prone position, why? You have to look for spinal anomalies. Always look for any other anomaly in the head, neck, chest, trunk, and finally spine, because spina bifida or neurogenic clubfoot may be associated, which you might miss. The mobility of the trunk and extremities should be always evaluated and look for TH, because that's a hidden anomaly. When you measure the limb lengths, measure the circumferences, the amount of deformity can be measured, and the neurology should be measured. So as we were taught, there are 4 parts to examine: look, feel, move, and measure. So when you look for the morphological features. look for spinal dysraphism, look for torticollis in the neck, and look for other limb deformities. When you feel, so this is an example that you have a clubfoot. Along with that, you can have multiple other anomalies because of a packaging problem. What are they? Torticollis, legiocephaly, congenital hyperextension of the knee, metatarsus adduct, and clubfoot. These may coexist. Always look for skin folds. Now this child, you can see excessive skin folds with a positive Galeazzi sign, which tells you that there could be DDH. So examination doesn't mean only look at the foot. When you feel for the mobility foot, and always palpate the hip for a click. So this is an example where here you can see hyperextension in the left knee with a vertical talus and straight knee with a club foot, but no creases. It's completely smooth. So this should tell you that we are probably dealing with arthrosis because there are multiple joint contractures, no creases seen, and stiff joints. Same, you can see this on the right side. This is a pterygium, flexion deformity in both knees with a popliteal pterygium and clubfoot associated. And look at the torticollis on the left side in this baby with clubfoot. When you move, you are trying to see if the foot is pliable or correct. So you must do the Pirani scoring, which we will come to later. Do telescopic testing for the hip. Look at movements. And please always tickle the toes in a child and demonstrate active dorsiflexion. That is very, very important because the minute you start Ponseti casting, after third or fourth plaster, the parents suddenly one day come and tell you that the child is not extending the toes. And then they blame you for creating compartment syndrome or peroneal palsy. And then you are worried or wondering whether you really created it or it was pre-existing. So every clubfoot, please tickle the outer border of the sole. Make sure that there is toe extension present and document it because it's extremely important to document that there was no neurological problem. And finally, also look for subtle spasticity, especially persistent fetal reflexes in premature edema with early gangrenous changes. Now this becomes a relative emergency where you must first release the band. But if it is not having such a thing, you can wait for the band, you can do the clubfoot first. Both have been accepted in literature. Now this, look at this peculiar clubfoot. This is macrodactyly, part of Proteus syndrome. So syndromic clubfoot should be apparent to you by just looking at it. The morphology itself is completely different. Also remember, you could have tibial hemimelia with varus, which looks exactly like clubfoot. So look at this. This was divergent tibial hemimelia. And somebody tries to treat it like clubfoot, you will not be successful. Because what happens is that there is absence of the distal tibia completely. That is why there is varus. So X-rays have some role and your clinical examination must be thorough to conclude that it is truly an idiopathic clubfoot and not some variation like this. So questions will be asked. What about radiology? Do you take X-rays? What should you say in exam? So please remember a few things. At 3 months, you will only see ossific centers of the calcaneus, talus, cuboid, and metatarsals. If X-rays are to be done, they have to be taken in two planes. One is a forced dorsiflexion view lateral and an AP with 30-degree cranial view. Now, X-rays are not mandatory to diagnose clubfoot. They are not mandatory to treat clubfoot. But if there is a complex clubfoot which is not responding to treatment, or to monitor your correction after a tenotomy, or to rule out syndromic or other causes, you are justified in saying, I will do X-ray. As a routine for a simple, straightforward idiopathic clubfoot, X-rays are not expected to be done as part of workup. Okay, these views have been described, the kite's view, AP and lateral, and the divergence of the kite's angles, which is normal. You will see that they are converging here. Okay, so these angles you can see, normally 20 to 40 is the angle, and parallelism indicates deformity. Now, you don't need X-rays to diagnose a clubfoot really. Okay, this is the Bariolais angle, which is the midfoot adduction angle. Now, if you have a relapse and you are planning a midfoot osteotomy, maybe you can do an X-ray to document how much is the angle and how much correction you want. So X-rays do have a role. They are essentially for relapses. They are essentially for complex club foot, where they may be warranted. Routine club foot doesn't need X-rays. Okay. What are the problems if you do X-rays at very early age? If he's a newborn and you take an X-ray. Okay. First thing is ossification centers are so small, then they are not centric. They are eccentric and oval. Navicular is not seen. And it's a two-dimensional image of a three-dimensional structure. So as I said, what is the role of radiology? Pre-op planning, assessment of reduction, sometimes to quantify results of surgery or guide to progression. Abnormal talocalcaneal angle does not mean a poor result. If good dorsiflexion is present and clinical correction is good, morphological correction is totally acceptable. And don't operate to get good X-rays, because you might overcorrect, over-lengthen and cause more problems and opposite deformities, right? Even Ponseti's original series, when they assessed radiology at maturity, they found nearly 60 to 70% did not have a perfect looking X-ray, but they had a perfectly functioning foot. Okay, so there are two different concepts. We are treating the foot, which is a morphological deformity and a functional entity. You don't treat X-rays. The next question you might be asked is about classifications. Now, some people, every examiner has his own thought process. You may get examiners from different parts of the country. Somebody says this is rigid club foot. Somebody says semi-rigid. Somebody says partially correctable. So there is always a problem in agreeing on choice of parameters. Which parameters should be used to classify club foot? So there is no universal agreement on etiology, no agreement on results, no agreement to which treatment. So that is why there are multiple classifications. For your purpose, you still need a classification which will eliminate all this confusion. What is recurrent, what is rigid, what is relapse, to have a common language of communication and have a planning of a management strategy and evaluate results. You should follow the Ponseti's method of classification, which is given in his book, and you can quote it in the exam. So you can take a picture of this slide if you want. A child under 2 years today in 2020, you should call it an untreated club. So when you get a patient who has not been treated and is less than 2 years, say, sir, this is a case of untreated club foot. If he has undergone treatment with Ponseti method and his foot gets corrected completely, you will say this is corrected club foot or treated club foot. If one component of that deformity recurs because of brace failure or overactivity of tibant or relapse of equinus because TA becomes short, you can call it recurrent club foot. Now a recurrent club foot goes back to Ponseti methodology and becomes treated club foot. But if it does not get corrected, you will call it resistant club foot. Otherwise, if your Ponseti has been started and you are not getting correction, then you call it resistant club foot. If the foot has undergone non-Ponseti methods, such as surgery, or he is syndromic, okay, then you will call it complex club foot to begin with, like you have Streeter's bands, arthrogryposis. So then when you present, you must say this is a case of a complex club foot, right? If the child has no treatment and he is over 2 years, then you call it neglected club foot. Okay. Now the problem with this terminology neglected, though it is mentioned in the book, is that sometimes it can land you into medical legal trouble, because when you say neglect, nowadays patients feel doctor has neglected. It may be the parents who have neglected for 2 years, right? So I find it a little bit dangerous to call anything neglected. So you might call it a late presenting club foot or something like that in practical terms. But classification has been published in Ponseti's book, and you can quote it that this is from Ponseti's book rather than saying other things. If you look at clinical classification, there are 3 basic types of club foot to help you understand. One is a positional or a postural club foot. The second is a true idiopathic club foot, and a third is the acquired or secondary club foot. Now, when you say acquired, it means complex club foot. Okay, and postural is just with having score 0. Okay, it could be idiopathic, but everything is correctable. So I'll demonstrate. Postural clubfoot is usually a packaging problem, which is easily correctable, flexible, with a normal space between the medial malleus and navicular. And the skin is normal. There are no furrows, there are no deep creases, and everything is pliable. For example, child is born with something like this, parents are concerned, but when you examine it, is easily correctable. So you call this a postural clubfoot, teach them exercises and review them. Usually in 3 months, they're all right. You don't need to do anything. Idiopathic clubfoot is a true talocalcaneonavicular dislocation with these features, where you will see the foot looks like this. You see that deep crease, you see the lateral malleolar prominence, you see a step off on the lateral side, you see a deep furrow on the medial and posterior medial side, and you see the rotational component. Like I said, when you see it tangentially, it is all twisted around. So it's a 3-dimensional deformity. Now this is a true clubfoot. This is true idiopathic clubfoot. And the third variety, which I said, is acquired or secondary. Now these are all complex clubfoot. What are the syndrome? Dystrophic dwarfism, Streeter's, Larsen, Freeman, Mobius, or neuromuscular conditions like meningomyelocele, spinal muscular atrophy, AMC, or CP. Examples for you to understand how they look. These are bands which may need a different approach. Freeman-Sheldon is where you have whistling faces, inadequate mouth opening with stiff club feet, which may need fixators. So your approach may change. So that the classification determines the severity. In the olden days, we had only Carroll's criteria. So Carroll spoke of severity criteria and rigidity criteria. Okay, so these were his criteria, which talked about dysplasia or rigidity, short first metatarsal, blanching of skin, a heel which is fixed to the fibula, and an atrophic calf. So he said this, the leg is dysplastic, but the severity depended on how much it was curved and how much was the pliability, which means how much was the deformity, which is like Pirani scoring. Okay, so you must know, if some older examiner asks what are modified Carroll's criteria. Also, there is one more classification of Demeglio and Bensahel, also called as the French classification. Now there is always an overlap between all these classifications. If you look at grade 1, okay, grade 1 or B9 means postural club, okay, the frequency of which is 20%. Grade 2 and 3, which are moderate to severe, are true idiopathic club feet, which is about 68%. And 4 or very severe is usually resistant complex clubfoot or syndromic. Okay, so all of them actually tell you the same thing in different ways, and there is a scoring point system here. Now, what is this point system? Now, they have said that you measure the correctability in all planes. In sagittal plane, you look at how much equinus can you correct. 90 to 45, you give 4 points. Then you give 45 to 20, 3 points. 20 to 0, 2 points. And minus 20, 1 point. So you do that for equinus, frontal plane varus, horizontal plane derotation of the whole block, and forefoot adduction. So everything you give points, and then those points tally up, total up, and then you have those 4 grades, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the problem with this classification, though it is very good, is imagine putting a goniometer on a neonate and measuring 90 to 45, 45 to 20, how accurate you will be. So these are cumbersome and practically not possible. Okay, so which is why this has not really caught on. But what caught on is something known as the Pirani severity scoring. Now this is very easy. You can do it in OPD. You should know that there are 3 points to the midfoot, 3 points to the hindfoot, and simply put, they give you correctability of the hindfoot as well as the equinus. Okay, so you look at the points given on Pirani scoring, the posterior crease, the empty heel, the rigid equinus, and the midfoot score, the curve of the lateral border, the depth of the medial crease, and how much talus you can cover with your reduction maneuver. So there are points for each. If there are multiple faint creases, now this implies pliability. The minute you see multiple creases, that means the skin has been mobile, which means it is correctable. So this is 0 points. If there is a single deep crease like this, but it is partially correctable, you give it 0.5. But totally rigid, deep cleft, no movement, 1 point, which makes it more rigid. The heel pad, 0 points if you can feel bone, 0.5 if you can feel something like cartilage, and 1 point if you feel just fat. Equinus, full correction 0. Coming to neutral 0.5, remaining in equinus 1. Lateral border, you take a pencil or a pen from your pocket, put it along the lateral border. If more than 70% of the lateral border touches the pencil, 0. If the takeoff is in the midfoot, somewhere between 30 and 50%, then you get 0.5, and only heel is touching, a rigid forefoot adduction. So you give 1 point. Medial creases correspond multiple fine creases, a semi-deep one crease or a deep crease. And how much is the reducibility? How much talar head can you reduce by abducting the forefoot? No reduction, 1 point, partial 0.5, complete 0. So every foot can receive a 6-point score. Hind foot 0 to 3, midfoot 0 to 3. Higher the score, more severe is your deformity. When we come to treatment, you have to understand that all these club feet have its own personality and should be treated such to have a goal of a functional, pain-free, normal-looking plantigrade foot, which has good mobility, no calluses, and doesn't require modified shoes. That is the goal. So the aim is to get that concentric talocalcaneo-navicular joint reduction and maintain it and establish a well-balanced foot for cosmesis and function. So what are the 4 ways in how you can treat a club foot? The first is serial manipulation and plasters. Second is surgical releases. Third is bony procedures. Fourth is instrumental distraction. Every method has a role at different points in time. So you must start off always neonates with the classical Ponseti treatment. You know that people have been talking about Kite's mistake, that he put his thumb on the anterior part of the calcaneum or the calcaneocuboid joint, and that caused prevention of derotation, and that fulcrum was wrong. So he was actually bending the calcaneocuboid joint. So he was trying to open up a foot which was not being allowed to derotate. So this is Kite's method, which I will not talk about much, but he had a lot of complications. And on an average, Kite required 12 to 16 casts to get his correction. And there was a lot of problem with that. Okay. So Ponseti is the one who taught us that you must move the fulcrum from the calcaneum to the talus. So the minute you do that, the whole picture changes. Now some examiners might ask you, what is the Paris method or the French method? So this was again described by the people who gave us the French classification. This is Professor Ben Sahel from Paris. So their treatment involves daily manipulation, but a physiotherapist does that. Okay, for 2 months, there are daily manipulations. They are more or less similar to Ponseti. Second, they have small stimulators. So they will stimulate the peroneal muscles for functional strengthening. Then they will use tapes. So they will use adhesive tapes and use a pediatric CPM. Okay, there are 3 weekly sessions till 6 months of age, and then they brace them. Despite all this, their posterior release rates are about 30%. So the French people follow this method in Europe, and they have reasonably good results. Ponseti method, you know, is a well thought out treatment of correcting the foot. Can you see the video running?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is the video seen? You can unmute and tell me.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. We can see the video.
Yes, sir. We can see.
I am just showing you the Ponseti method here. So you palpate and see where the lateral border of the fibula tip is. 1 centimeter in front of it. You must come 1 centimeter in front of it. That is where the talar head neck lies. And then hold the shin with your hand, the thumb on the talus. You have to supinate, which means you lift up the first ray, elevate the first ray and abduct it gradually. Elevation of the first ray is important because you are now correcting the cavus by supinating the forefoot. Now the understanding of that is that the hind foot and forefoot both are supinated, but the hind foot is less supinated than the forefoot. The forefoot is more supinated. The forefoot is pronated. So the pronation of the forefoot has to be corrected by supinating the forefoot and then abducting it. Unless you do this, the cavus won't get corrected. So what you do is elevate the first ray, put your hand under the first metatarsal head and against the fixed talus, supinate and abduct, supinate and abduct, and then you will start getting your correction. So the first plaster is in exaggerated supination, then use a very thin layer of cotton and do below knee plaster first. When you are waiting for the plaster to consolidate, never put your thumb on the talus. Make sure it is on the plantar aspect and on the shin so that you don't create pressure source on the talus. So elevate it and abduct, elevate it and abduct, and keep on doing this every time till you come to at least more than 40 degrees of abduction, when you will then do your tenotomy. Okay, so it's a weekly stretching of contracture with a cast application. Here you use cast, there are no tapes. Okay, approximately 5 to 6 plasters are usually enough till you get about 70-degree abduction, and then you do the tenotomy. Post correction, you need to stabilize the foot for long period of time in abduction and external rotation. So a modification of the DB splint called a Steenbeek brace is used. If you do not use bracing correctly, you get 50% recurrence rates. Example of a idiopathic clubfoot, Ponseti cast, gradual correction, that is its function. Now this method became so famous because of this one paper in 1991. So everybody, all residents should read this paper and memorize it, because people in exam will ask you if you do well, how did Ponseti, see, he has been doing this method since 1960s. Why did he become famous after 1991? Because he published, not he, his students, Cooper and Dietz, they published a paper where they had clubfoot 78 patients, 71 patients, where they had excellent results in 62% good in, which was 78% good to excellent. Okay, at a 30-year follow-up, which means after 30 years of treatment in 1991, this cohort of patients, they compared to normal people, and their result of normal people was 63% excellent, 22% good, which made it 75%. Okay, sorry, 85%, and this was 78%. So statistically, they were near to normal with conservative treatment. And in between, in those 30 years, so many surgeries had been described, and none of the surgeries could match up to these results. Okay, so this paper made it absolute landmark, and things have changed after that dramatically. So this is the paper again from Italy, and they have found that that works very well. Coming to surgery, when do you do surgery? If you follow Carroll's criteria, it used to be done when the CTV was supposed to be rigid. Okay, nowadays we don't use that. Post casting, if the child is non-compliant, or if he comes to you late, or you are unable to correct it with Ponseti method, making it a complex clubfoot or an acquired clubfoot, which means syndromic. So resistant clubfoot and complex clubfoot and neglected clubfoot. These are the three new terminologies where you will consider surgical release. Between 6 months to about 3 years, soft tissue procedures are standard. Between 4 years to 8 years, you may need to add a lateral column shortening to the soft tissue procedure. And after 9 years, bony procedures are usually required, and you may consider differential distraction. Problems with surgery, extensive dissections may be needed. Sometimes the tarsal bones are deformed, so they don't match. You may end up doing too much of a release and cause overcorrection. Touching cartilage in very young age causes stiffness, scarring, and muscle weakness in the long term. And generally, most papers have demonstrated that surgical results are poorer than conservatively done treatment. Okay. The most popular historical procedure was the Turco's single stage posteromedial release, which now we don't do because of its complications and medial scarring and recurrence. But you should know, for historical purposes, Turco's PMR was the standard procedure. I'm sure Pachore sir must have seen and done a lot in his time. The concept was changed by Mackay and Simon in 1977 when they identified the importance of the posterolateral corner. So they talked about the calcaneal spin, which is why they said that the posterolateral release also should be done, which made sense when you considered a rotational deformity. So the posterolateral tether has to be cut to allow the calcaneum to derotate, and then you give cast and stabilize it. Now to approach the posterolateral corner, two incisions were described. One was Cincinnati method from Ohio, described by Alvin Crawford. Now that had wound dehiscence problems and healing problems. And Carroll described a two incision technique, posterolateral incision and additional plantar medial, leaving the posteromedial skin bridge intact, which was cosmetically superior and did not cause medial scarring. Okay. In the operative procedure, the aim is to release all contractures, which are tibialis posterior, tendo-achilis, talonavicular joint, subtalar joint capsules, calcaneofibular ligament, the tendon sheaths crossing the subtalar joint, and the plantar fascia. So in exam, some examiner may ask you name all the structures which need to be released or lengthened. So you must classify them as plantar structures, posterior structures, and lateral structures. Okay, and then accordingly tell what is to be released. So all muscle tendon units have to be lengthened, such as Achilles, hip post, abductor hallucis excised, FHL, FDL, Z-plasty, FDB, plantar fascia, quadratus plantae rarely. Capsulo-ligamentous structures are released. Talonavicular, subtalar, calcaneocuboid, ankle, and calcaneofibular, which is syndesmotic, posterior talofibular, and intraosseous. Intraosseous never release completely, otherwise you will end up with overcorrection. So between talus and calcaneum, the ligament should not be released. Okay, everything else you can release. So example of an older child with a club foot, that is post surgery, two incision technique, Carroll's method, that's the plantar medial incision, that is left sided correction, and then tarsopronator shoes. When do you do tendon transfers? People also ask that tendon transfers, when will you do? So you must remember that you cannot do a tendon transfer in a stiff foot or a uncorrected foot. When you have full correction, so a demonstrable dynamic imbalance with a supple feet. So you have done Ponseti, correction is reasonable, but when the child walks, he goes into inversion on swing phase and lands on the outer side. Okay, 30% of original Ponseti patients also had a dynamic supination problem and he required to do a full T-band transfer. So their weight bearing is on the lateral border, but passively you can correct the foot. Unless there is passive correctability, you can't talk of a tendon transfer. Commonly T-band is transferred, other tendons are anecdotal. So this is an example. The videos are not working. Okay, so this is the dynamic inversion, and this was after the T-band was transferred to the lateral cuneiform. And the surgery is advised to be done after 3 to 4 years because you can see the lateral cuneiform ossified after that age. So you know exactly where to put it. And it is ossified for good anchorage. If you put it in cartilage, you may cause growth arrest as well as you may place it incorrectly. So 3 years is a good age. 3 years and above is a good age to do a T-band transfer. Bony procedure. Bony procedures are, as I said, shortening of the lateral column. So various types have been described. Decancellization of the cuboid. Just take away the bone from the cuboid and crush it. Or anterior calcaneal process excision or cuboid, calcaneocuboid wedge resection, which was Evans' procedure. For the hindfoot varus in older child, you can do calcaneal slide or calcaneal shift. Two kinds of osteotomies can be done. Triple arthrodesis is only reserved in the scarred, painful adolescent foot. Or the commonest procedure is a lateral transcuneiform osteotomy and a tibial torsional osteotomy for in-toeing. Okay, so this is the classical bean-shaped foot where you will do a cuboid closing wedge with a trans-tarsal osteotomy and bring it out and translocate it to get a well-corrected foot. So this is what is described in the paper by Arjun Mahadev. You do a lateral closing wedge, but at the apex you cut across the tarsal bones and then you translate it so that you get a good correction. So this is the midfoot translational osteotomy. You can see going through the tarsal bones, and the bean-shaped foot with midfoot adductus can be converted to a straight lateral border. Okay, that is for midfoot adduction. And internal tibial torsion, sometimes they have a good pliable foot, but they walk in toe. Now the problem may be torsion in the femur or torsion in the tibia. You normally wait for 7 years because by 7 years the torsion improves. After 7, if it doesn't improve and it is unilateral, you may be justified in doing a supramalleolar derotation correction osteotomy. An example where we have corrected a left-sided into a corrected foot. Now remember again, the foot has to be supple. You are correcting only the torsion. You cannot do this with a stiff foot. Okay, so this is a type 3. Again, a supple. Here I have done, you see there is a heel varus and a midfoot adduction. So what we did was a calcaneal slide for the hindfoot varus, which took the forefoot with it. And then we did a midfoot osteotomy of cuboid closing wedge. So that is how we corrected it. So you have to do bony procedures in older age group, depending on how pliable it is or how stiff it is. And very stiff foot like this, which is operated multiple times with scarring, my preference is to do an external fixator. BB Joshi's fixator, modified by Dr. Lad and UMEX group. You should know both. And that is the correction with differential distraction in 4 to 6 weeks time. That is his 1 year follow-up with good flexibility and stretchability. Okay, so this is an example, a stiff adolescent foot. That is a combination. Now this, I think this image is slightly ulta. But he was a near adult 14-year-old with this kind of deformity. So we did percutaneous releases and used a fixator, got him out to as much as correction as possible. And then we did a triple arthrodesis so that the wedges removed were minimal. So we could bring him to a nice corrected position from that. So it was a fixator assisted correction with a triple arthrodesis to maintain. Operative complications are technical failure, wound slough, all this you know. Can read that, and you shouldn't be in a situation where you end up. Now this gentleman had a clubfoot surgery when he was a child, and I could correct his child's foot with just Ponseti. So he was so grateful. He said he was very scared because this is what happened to his feet after surgery. This is the classical posteromedial release. You can see the posteromedial scar. And at 28 years of age, he was walking around like this, and his son had a clubfoot, which we did just plasters. So nobody should end up in 2020 with something like this, or something like this where there is overcorrection. You can see a calcaneus deformity, tendoachelis over lengthening with a pistol grip deformity with weak tendoachelis, right? So that is something quite horrible and cannot be reversed. Differential distraction, I told you, Jess, UMEX, Elizaro, up to you. Some principles of differential distraction you must know: reduction, retention, remodeling. I won't go too much into details here. Show you some examples if you want. A syndromic child treated with soft tissue distraction followed by plaster. Older child, again, fixated assisted correction, and then you can do a triple arthrodesis to maintain correction with minimal wedges, something like this. And arthrogrypotic children who have been operated earlier, again, correction like this to give them a plantigrade decent looking foot. Please always remember, in unilateral club feet, one foot, despite a good result, will be atrophic calf and the foot will be smaller in size, whatever you do. So bilateral usually will be symmetrical, so you can't make out. But unilateral, before the first plaster, warn the parents that the one foot is going to be functionally all right, but when you buy shoes, you might have to buy one size smaller and the calf will be thinner, but functionally they'll be fine. Because otherwise they are going to blame you कि plaster के वजह से ये सूख गया पैर. That also happens. So you must be medico-legally also sound and protect yourself and warn them that this is going to happen. But they all will lead a functionally complete and productive life. So thank you very much for your attention and this opportunity. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might be having.
Yes, any resident who want to ask any question to sir, please proceed.
So anybody has questions, please unmute yourself and ask so that I can answer.
Sir, I want to clear one topic on their behalf. Sir, in book they have written that a modified Ponseti classic scoring system, they have added 4 parameters. So
Sorry,
is it true?
Can you repeat? My volume was off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir, in some books I've read during my residency that modified Pirani scoring. So 4 parameters has been added. So is it true that we need to speak in exam?
No. So the fun part about this is that in the 2018 Nagpur Posikon, Shafiq Pirani was our faculty. And Dr. Ben Sahel was also there. Okay, and we asked Pirani about this same thing what you are asking me. Have you added? He said, in my original manuscript before it got published, I had added some points which I deleted later. I don't know from where Campbell got that and I published it. I do not use anything more than 6 points. So there is no 10 point. Huh? So you forget about it.
Okay.
Pirani himself has said he has not written 10 points.
Okay. Yes, sir. Anybody else want to ask a question?
Sir, can I ask a question, sir?
Hello, yes.
Proceed.
Sir, in exam, we are asked what is the exact sequence of the soft tissue release we do in soft tissue procedures, sir? After one by one, what is the structure they ask, sir?
So that's what I told you. You should always have a plan of action, how you are going to answer. You have to say that I have to do a circumferential subtalar release, and I will be using a 2 incision technique if you want to do that. Or if you want to talk about Crawford-Cincinnati approach, talk about that. But you should be confident and say what you are going to use and describe it correctly. So you can say that in this 2-year-old, I would like to do a 2 incision Carroll's technique through the posterolateral incision. These are the structures I will release. Endoachelis, I will do Z-plasty. I will identify ankle capsule, do a capsulotomy. I will identify subtalar capsule, I will do capsulotomy. Then I will identify syndesmotic ligaments, do the release. Then I will move laterally, release the peroneal sheath, retract the peroneal tendons, go to calcaneofibular ligament and do posterolateral release. After that, I will move medially. I will be careful that I don't over-release the deltoid ligament. And if the toes are tight, I will do Z-plasty of the FHL and the FDL at that. Through the plantar medial incision, I will do abductor hallucis excision. I will release talonavicular capsule. I will release plantar fascia. And I will release master knot of Henry, which is pulling the navicular down.
Yes.
That's it. And then I will do hemostasis and close it and tibialis posterior if required. So make a clear-cut plan, what structures and how you will approach them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And sir, one question for Pirani scoring. Of that original 6 parameters, we need to check Pirani score by correcting all 6, sir.
Pardon me? No, normally when you measure, correctability is for hindfoot and midfoot both. So you tie correctability, according to that you give points.
No, sir, I didn't get you. What you say, sir?
So day 1, you might be having a score of 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Because everything is stiff.
Yes.
But you are trying to attempt to correct it, no?
Yes.
But nothing moves because it is stiff. As time goes by, the Pirani score changes because it becomes more and more supple.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Yeah, but I'll tell you the fallacy of Pirani also. The fun part of Pirani is that if you look at the hindfoot scores, okay, what are the scores? Deep crease, empty heel, and rigid equinus.
Yes.
Now, unfortunately, all 3 go hand in hand or are concomitant. You cannot have thin creases and no dorsiflexion. It is not possible, no? All 3 go hand in hand. So your score will always be symmetrical. It has to be 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0, 0, 0 or 1, 1, 1. You cannot have 0.5, 1 and 0.5.
Yes, sir.
If one parameter changes, the other has to change because they are interdependent.
Yes. Yes, sir.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Anybody else want to ask a question?
Sir, I have one doubt. You talked about BB Joshi's external fixator and Dr. Ladsar's modification.
Correct.
And one more doctor's modification along with Dr. Ladsar's modification. Which was that name?
No, Dr. Lad's team modified it and called it UMEX, Universal Mini External Fixator. Now, the concept is the same. It is Ilizarov's principle of differential distraction to stretch out collagen tissue and achieve length. Okay. Dr. BB Joshi, the original fixator was made of brass. Okay. And they had round holes, which was modified to stainless steel with teardrop holes for better fixation and for the international market. The rods which were smooth were made into roughened or something that is called as knurled rods, so that the friction is more and they don't loosen very easily. and they introduced what was called as an open section clamp. Earlier days when we used to do BB Joshi, if we made one mistake, we had to undo the whole thing because we had to take out the rods. It was a round hole and reinsert the whole thing. Now with an open section clamp, if there is a small error, we can add on a clamp by a side entry. The round hole made it mandatory for a central entry for the pin or the rod. So it is just technical. The concept of differential distraction is the same. Both work equally well.
What is the name of those rough and rods, sir?
Knurling is a process. It's an engineering process. A smooth rod which is roughened for better grip is called KNURL, knurling.
Okay. Knurled rods.
Knurled rod.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other question?
Sir, can you explain about stiff and complex club foot once again, sir?
Yeah. So complex club foot is something that is syndromic, untreated, or treated by a non-Ponseti methodology, or resistant to treatment by Ponseti.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Sandeep sir, we will not take much of your time, and thank